welcome to another edition of the Energy Week podcast. Ryan Ray alongside the one, the only, the infamous and famous Dr. Ellen Wald. Ellen, how's it going?
Well, since I am not hanging out in the basement of the OPEC building with no food, then, everything is great. When you
Okay.
compare it to where I could be right now, I decided not to go to Vienna this year for the OPEC meeting, which I think all around was an excellent life decision.
Well, there you go. Well, we got a lot to get into. We are actually recording this, awaiting the OPEC Plus results, so we might not have we have some to discuss about that in the articles, but probably won't have a full recap until next week just because the press conference hasn't come out yet. But we do, Ellen, we do have a review that has been updated a few weeks ago. I just now saw this from an old listener of the show, Spiegner. Spiegner says, E&Ps in Permian keep pumping into oblivion. Oil investors are fed up as well as banks seeing the light. Every podcast out there lauds how great all this U.S. production is, energy independence, etc. All this pumping will cause deserved bankruptcies and increased unemployment. That is what investors are hoping to see and are about to see a lot of, and Frackers calls this on themselves. So I read that, and I had a couple thoughts, and I'll let you chime in as well here. But my first thing was, I think, I don't know on this, it's kind of hard to remember what you say and where at some point, but on the Texas Oil and Gas podcast, we kind of reiterated this morning. We have been big advocates of price stability. We don't want, when the prices were falling, a lot of people in the industry were saying, man, we want $100 oil again, $100 oil again. And our stance is no, we don't want $100 oil because they'll just drill it back down. We want price stability. If it can stay at 55, 62, whatever, long-term price stability is good for the industry. Part of that reasoning is that we don't want unemployment in the industry. When we talk on this show especially, we talk a lot more about OPEC than we do the frackers. The reality is that OPEC, you can't actually look and see what they're going to do as a collective movement. There is no Permian group that actually controls what the Permian producers do. So I kind of take it for granted that when we talk about the U.S. production, we really don't know what they're going to do until they announce it on a quarterly or annual or whatever type announcement, biannual, whatever it may be. So it's kind of hard to really talk about what we think about that because it's just they're going to do either A if they think they can make money, or B if they're trying to keep acreage or something like that. So it's really kind of hard to analyze the U.S. frackers on the same way. And the final thing I'll say is that I know I said it on here. I'm almost positive that my opinion is that long term in the Permian you will see more bigger majors buy out the smaller companies, which will then ultimately create stability because there will be less players in the Permian. And it will be more closer to something like OPEC. Obviously, you won't have these joint meetings and announcements of things. But if you went from 100 drillers to 15 drillers or whatever the case would be, it would actually balance out the market because you would have fewer people's interest that would have a more diverse portfolio that would then allow them to make money in a lot of different ways. That's kind of my thoughts on this, Ellen. What am I missing there, or what are your thoughts?
I mean, you can't make the frackers frack less unless you take some sort of incentive for them not to pump. So unless the government is going to pay them not to pump,
Right.
Then that's the way it works. And this government's definitely not going to pay people not to pump oil. That's totally not where we're at. Maybe if oil was selling for 23 cents a barrel, then it would make sense. I mean, that would be akin to what we saw during the Great Depression, where the government basically paid farmers not to produce in order to get crop prices up and all sorts of things like that, which was a pretty big radical move by the government to begin with. So I say it's pretty unlikely we're going to see something like that. I mean, we can get voluntary association, the Texas Railroad, the authority had some, they were really voluntary. They pressured everyone to do it, and a lot of people did it, but it wasn't like if someone wanted to pump, they couldn't. There was nothing really stopping them. So, I mean, there's nothing you can do. This is not, even OPEC is all voluntary. People can still pump what they want, and they do. It's just that they've all sort of gotten together and agreed that it's in their best interests to restrain themselves. So, I mean, I'm not sure what you'd expect other than for people to be bad frackers, stop pumping so much. there's nothing. I mean, but people like it. I mean, you can't. Not everyone is lauding the frackers for pumping so much, but this is just the way the economy works.
Right. And the other thing is that we cannot guarantee, and you've talked about this a lot, we cannot guarantee that what the frackers are doing will ultimately hurt the oil and gas industry. We might feel strongly about it. We might think that's where it's going to go. But if tomorrow the U.S. and Iran go to war, if tomorrow President Trump strikes some crazy trade deal, there are so many things out there that we cannot actually reasonably predict that you can't say that I for sure know this is going to happen, because we don't, and we talk about that a lot. Is that, well, wow, okay, just 2 weeks ago we had U.S. troops getting ready to bomb a facility in Iran, which, if that were to happen, prices would have rose. Of course, the Trump's trying to get this trade deal done. Maybe he does, maybe he won't. All those things are always in flux, and so it's really kind of hard to say. Even if I were to agree, and on some level I'm very sympathetic to the argument of that we're over drilling, we don't know what's going to happen 3 to 4 months from now.
Yeah, we don't. And, on the plus side, the U.S. exported something like 4 million barrels a day.
Right.
I mean, that may be combined, but like with products, but I mean, that's a lot of exports. Since when are exports bad?
Anyways, but speaker, he has listened to the show, both shows, for a while. We do appreciate his comments. Energy Week podcast. Would love to hear more about what he thinks, because he seems to be tied up in that business. So reach out to us through the website, and we'd love to hear more about what is it that we are missing. Okay, let's turn now to the New York Times. As coal fades in the U.S., natural gas becomes the climate battleground, and there was some really, I don't want to say startling, surprising numbers at just how much the change is going from coal to natural gas. If you looked at it, you kind of hear these headlines, but you look at some of the numbers. I'm trying to think. It was Excel Energy. I can't remember who. Maybe it was Duke. One of them. I was reading through this piece, and it was really, I didn't realize at what pace this is actually happening, Ellen.
Yeah, it's really quite amazing, and it's interesting because, we can say like, oh, we want beautiful, clean coal, or some people can say they want that. But the fact is that even economically, the switch away from coal is happening. And, it's one thing to put all these regulations like on the nuclear power plants, sorry, not nuclear power plants, on the power plants to try to push that transition to happen sooner. But if natural gas is just so cheap and people don't like coal, I mean, I'm sorry for people who lose their jobs as coal miners, but this is what happens. The economy changes. We have very cheap source of energy that's, in natural gas. What I thought was interesting is that there's this divide between those who are those who support natural gas and those who don't like it and see it as detrimental to shifting towards renewables. And I think that is a really interesting divide here, and that if that continues, it seems as though we're going to see a real divide in energy prices between states that didn't embrace natural gas and instead pushed for more renewables that probably really weren't prepared for that. Renewables that can't really provide the same kind of electricity stability that natural gas can. They're either going to find that they have to keep their coal plants open, maybe, or they're just going to have really, really, really expensive electricity prices. And places that embrace it are going to have lower electricity prices. And I just think it'll be a really interesting divide between states.
Yeah, and it won't happen this way, but I really wish we'd let this play out to where if you want to go with renewables, or you want to go with natural gas, or you want to go with coal, we just let you kind of do your thing. And then there's not subsidies for making up on what I would argue are bad decisions at this point. So if you want to go with solar, you want to go with wind, go for it. But I think that it should be a little bit more clear that, hey, the federal government is going to subsidize your energy cost or in 5 to 10 years, because right now, at least, I mean, I'm not anti-renewable, but right now it's just that the comparison is not even close. We have so much natural gas. And as the article points out, if you build the natural gas infrastructure now, you're good for 30 years. It's not like you're going to build this with minus some rare exceptions for some bad pipe or something like that. It's not you're going to build this stuff and then in 3 years you have to replace it. This is 30 years, which if you're a renewable proponent, it seems like this would be perfect for you. Build out the natural gas infrastructure. It gives renewables 30 years to start making up that gap before there's extra pressure on that system. It seemed like a no-brainer for renewables that kind of gives them the chance to flourish, if you will, instead of being pushed out into the market a little too soon.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Okay, let's go now to something we are going to have more about next week, but this will have to suffice for right now. From Platts, Saudi energy minister backs OPEC plus oil cut extension after Putin MBS meet. And I saw someone, I don't know who it was, tweeting about Putin and making the announcement and all that this over the weekend. It feels like, until the news breaks, that the cut extension will happen for 6 to 9 months.
Yeah, from what I'm hearing on the ground from my sources who write on Twitter that anyone can follow, honestly.
Sources close to the situation.
Sources close to the situation here. What I'm hearing is that they've all agreed on the cut extension. And the issue right now is over whether OPEC is going to approve some sort of charter for OPEC plus. And I can see why that's a huge issue because, essentially, like, they've basically ceded their power to Russia. And I can see there being a fight over, like, whether this is a good idea. And honestly, if I were Iran or any other nation, even other than Saudi Arabia, I'd put up a big fight and say, I don't think this is a good idea. So I can see why they're kind of all stalled out right now. And particularly because, this is what it looks like what happened. Novak, the Russian energy minister, and Khalid al-Faleh, the Saudi minister, talk all the time. So they probably hashed this stuff out, and they were going to meet in person during the G20 and just, come to an agreement, which is fine. They do this all the time. It doesn't look great. But then Mohammed bin Salman, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, was at the G20, and he looked very prominent at the G20, mostly because Saudi Arabia is going to be hosting. It's their turn to host the G20 next year, and so because of that, they get like prime placement in pictures and stuff like that. Also, he's highly visible in his thobe compared to all the suits. But so he met with Putin, and basically after that meeting, no one really knows what they talked about, but Putin came out and said, we've agreed to extend the production cuts. We're very happy with this. Well, there you go. Putin just stole OPEC's thunder completely, just like pulled the rug out of under them. And that's Putin's way of saying, you guys did a deal with Russia. Well, now we're the big guys on the block, screw you. That's essentially what Putin did. And understandably, all these other OPEC countries were pissed because they're part of this group. They pay money. They pay a lot of money just to be a part of OPEC, to maintain the building, to publish all these reports. They have a huge staff at OPEC. OPEC is more than just the oil ministers. It's actually a serious institution. And so you can understand why they're like, wait a minute, we're part of this organization. Maybe they don't produce that much, but still, when Putin goes and flaunts it in their face that they're basically nothing, it's going to cause problems. And I think that that's what we're seeing now, which is why this meeting is still going on. And I wonder if they're not just going to break, or haven't break yet, or are going to break it and say, oh, well, I guess we're going to pick it up tomorrow. And hold off making an announcement about what's going on in production, because they don't like the way that their entire organization has been co-opted by Russia. So,
question, is this a historic thing that Putin has done, or is it Putin feeling a little pressure from the U.S. and China, making deals on the side, working out the trade agreement? Is it, so maybe we rephrase it maybe, is this in the norm with how Putin has handled his meetings, or, as we saw the weekend, we have Trump and China maybe come to terms and he's trying to reestablish some power on the global scene?
I see it more as just Putin being Putin.
Okay.
He's like, hey, you guys gave us this power. You guys tied yourselves to us, and I'm Russia, and I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to make myself look big. Why should I make it look like all of your, organization and all these other countries actually matter. No, I'm a big guy. So
It's not like the media over there is going to be too critical of him either.
well, yeah. I mean, I think at a certain point they just get really pissed. Oh, you mean the Russian media? Yeah, of course
Yeah.
not. They love it. The Russian media loves it when Putin makes them look big. Sorry, I thought you meant the media stuck in the basement.
Oh, no, no, no. On an aside, I saw that Trump and Kim Jong-un were meeting, and Trump starts making fun of the U.S. press. Like they're always around, they're always bothering him or something, and he kind of says something to Un, like, I'm sure you know what that's like. And I thought, no, Un probably doesn't because they're all scared to death of him. So.
Yeah, exactly. Oh boy.
Not exactly the same. So,
Not
anyway.
exactly the same
All
at
right.
all.
This is something we've talked about before. It's an interesting story that I think is worth following for sure. Glad you put it in here. From Reuters, Saudi Arabia must okay non-proliferation standard according to the U.S. Energy Secretary, which is, of course, Texas' own Rick Perry. It seems that this story keeps getting steam, keeps moving in that direction, Ellen. I mean, just in general, this as we look towards nuclear, I think I made my sense clear. I think it should be good for more countries to get this to make sense. With the U.S. trying to close out some of these deals with China, with stuff like this, with Iran, we kind of have this story that's kind of been lagging in the background with nuclear, with the Saudis. How much of that plays into some of these other international negotiations that Trump's making when he's trying to leverage what he's got going on with the Saudis?
Yeah, I think that this is a really interesting issue right now. And one of the things that we have to realize, and we talk a lot about energy mixes and different energy issues that in the U.S. But one of the things you have to realize is when you look at Saudi Arabia's energy profile, they really only have two serious ways of generating electricity, and that's oil and gas. They don't have any rivers. They don't have any hydroelectric. There's no possibility for hydroelectricity. And in the U.S., when they talk about, renewable energy, hydroelectricity still makes up the biggest chunk of our renewable energy profile. So it's a huge issue, and they really do have an electricity generation issue. They don't want to burn oil. They don't want to stick their crude oil in power plants and burn it. And I can see why. It's bad economic policy because they can make much more selling that oil abroad, and it's horrible for the environment. So they've actually transitioned a lot of that to gas, but still, they don't even they generate mostly associated gas, and they don't have enough because their electricity needs grow by a huge amount. So what are the options? Okay, solar and wind, they're working on it. They're working on building these massive solar installations, but even still, none of those solar installations will generate enough power on the scale that they need. So from their perspective, they really do need nuclear power. But here's the problem. Who wants more nuclear proliferation in the Middle East? I mean, I can see why people are really hesitant to support this. And I've argued for a while, I even argued this in Arab News, which is the English language newspaper there, that Saudi Arabia needs this, they need nuclear power. And so what they should do is basically say to the US, we want to buy it from you, and we are going to be completely open and transparent, and we will adhere to extra regulations and anything you want to show that we're not we're not refining uranium. We're not doing any of that. We're not making weapons. We'll make it totally transparent. And I think that the U.S., at least, I think there are a lot of people who are very against this, but I do think that Secretary Perry is, that he sees this. He says, look, and plus the U.S. would rather sell the Saudis nuclear technology than have Russia sell it to them, or South Korea or France, right?
Right.
So I do think he sees this. It's going to take a long time to get there, and they need it sooner rather than later.
Yeah. The thing I'm curious about is there's a paragraph in here that says essentially that the Saudis, it seems, one of their concerns, the way they're phrasing it is that they're afraid that they can't make nuclear bombs because they're afraid that Iran might, and if Iran does, then they want to be able to make them. It's kind of how I'm reading that. But I would
Yeah, I think
imagine.
they're being, I think that they say that, but the truth is, if they want a nuclear bomb, they- they're not going to make a nuclear bomb. I mean, let's be serious. They don't have the know-how to do it. Their best bet for getting a nuclear bomb is to buy it from Pakistan, and if Pakistan
You're talking about
tells them
Iran.
buy it, yep, yeah. If they're concerned
Iran can't
about,
make one.
no, Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia. Okay, Saudis.
They don't
Okay.
have the tech. They don't
Okay.
have the know-how. They don't have anyone who knows how to do this. Like, this is a long time away. They're way farther from a nuclear bomb than Iran is. Iran's much more likely to be able to make a nuclear bomb than Saudi
Right.
Arabia. But if the
Well,
Saudis want a nuclear bomb, they'll buy one from Pakistan, or worst comes to worst, they'll probably buy one from Israel.
that was what I was getting to. Is that okay? Let's just say that is a legit concern. That hey, you're afraid about the Iranians may have their own nuclear bomb. It feels like you have a pretty good ally in the United States, at least right now, and you have historically. I mean, we are fighting a war with them on some level in Yemen, and so I don't. To me, that's kind of a weird way to push back, is to say that you want to have your own ability to build your own bomb because you're afraid of Iran because of their position in the oil market, they have a lot of good allies. So, and also it wouldn't really make sense, I don't think, for the Iranians to drop a nuke on the Saudis. That just doesn't really. I mean, we always talk about this fear of Middle Eastern wars and stuff like that, but I'm not. That just doesn't seem like anything plausible that's going to happen. But why? Let me just maybe rephrase this. Why would they make that an issue? Because we both agree that it's not something that's going to happen immediately. It's not something that should be even on the table of consideration right now. So why are they so worried about this? If the current administration has made it very clear, if you threaten the U.S. or its allies, they're going to come bomb you. So why are the Saudis making this kind of a deal breaker, or is it some other negotiation for chip for something else? You think?
Yeah, I mean, they have really bad PR. That's the only example. I mean, that's the only answer I can give you is that they
Okay.
really, really are horrible at PR.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Saudis, if you want to contact us, injurypodcast.com, contact form. We'll be happy to advise you on how to handle this stuff a little better in the future. You're dealing with Rick Perry. Surely you can get something
Yeah.
past that guy. Okay, going to spglobal.com. Iraq's brighter oil future at odds with meeting OPEC quota. Poor Iraq. They can't catch a break. Or can they?
No.
It seems like every week we talk about Iraq. It's a few weeks ago. It was maybe the Iranians were smuggling through, and then it was all of a sudden everyone's cracking down on the Iranian oil, and Iraq, kind of where do they play? They only have, as we pointed out last week, 36 miles of actual coast. Should we feel sorry for Iraq, Helen?
No, you should never feel sorry for Iraq. I mean, did you know what happened last week after that Bahrain conference? They basically let all these people go and protest outside the Bahraini embassy in Baghdad, and like they had to like evacuate the embassy. They like stormed the embassy. I mean, I don't feel sorry for them. They don't.
I
I'm
don't
sorry,
either. I
guys.
don't
I mean,
either.
they let one of their shipments be compromised with Iranian oil last week.
Let is probably too nice of a term. I would say, they facilitated, encouraged.
Okay, yeah.
So, what should we take from this piece, though, Ellen?
I mean, I think it's interesting because they are really the second largest exporter in OPEC, and that
Hmm.
gives them clout. And it's interesting that they don't really use that clout. They just use it as like, yeah, we know we're overproducing, but what are you gonna do about it, right? Nothing.
Yeah.
They just do what they want. They had kind of said that they really, I mean, look, they pumped 4.82 million barrels a day. That doesn't mean they're exporting that much, but they pumped 4.82 million barrels a day in May. That was compared with their quota, which is 4.51 million barrels per day. So that's a lot over. And the only reason that it doesn't look worse on the global scale is because Saudi Arabia cut more, and the sanctions on Iran and the sanctions on Venezuela. I mean, basically, this OPEC deal is really like it's crap. It's just, it's just like the sanctions are saving it.
Yeah, well, and I guess the joke about feel sorry for them is they do have a government that is basically been under siege since what 2003, 4, whenever it was when we went to war with them, which obviously has caused some economic woes, and we can argue whether or not that was of their own doing or not. But regardless, that is a problem, and trying to make back money. One of the things that I found interesting from this piece was it says, despite the low level of compliance, I cannot say that gentleman's name. Gabadon said. Said Iraq supports prolonging the cut. That so far the agreement has not been effective enough. He called for a rollover of the agreement at the same cut level, if not deeper. I thought, you know what? Good for him.
We haven't cut. The agreement's not effective enough.
Yeah.
I wonder why.
I like it. Hey, you know what? You guys keep cutting. Let's increase the standard. This is great for everyone. We're probably not going to cut, but you please keep cutting. I thought at least he's being honest there.
Yeah. Hey, work with what you have, right?
Okay, let's go to CNBC. U.S. oil surges above $60 as OPEC Plus poised to extend supply cut. You know, David Blackman had a piece out last week talking about some of the big factors. One was the Trump-China deal, which we got some progress on potentially over the weekend. The OPEC Plus cuts, obviously extended, are another one. One of the things that David theorized, Dylan, was that if the cuts do not get extended, that you could see WTI fall as low as 42 a barrel. Going back to our original statement about the frackers and over drilling, that would probably nip that in the bud moving forward. Prices, as I checked this morning, they weren't still at 60. They were at, 59, 58?
This article is actually from this morning, I think, which was interesting because they briefly went up to 60 and they've since dropped.
Okay.
And I think that what that's showing is actually that nobody really cares that much about this OPEC thing. First of all,
Right.
because it was basically announced at the G20.
Yeah.
And
as long as they stay with what everyone anticipates, no one cares about it.
yeah, although
Right.
I honestly, I don't know if it would drop to 40 so quickly, just because I think everyone's so focused on demand. I think it would take a while to get down to 40. I think, because I don't think that it's up. I don't think we're seeing as big of a bump as we normally would, because everyone is so focused on the trade issues. I just think like this is the biggest OPEC meeting with the littlest meaning.
Yeah, it's at 58.50 at the time of this recording. So
yeah, but I thought
yeah.
that was interesting to see how it's changed throughout the day. That it was up its highest in the morning, and now it's just basically come back down.
Yeah. Well, I mean, right. I mean, it's not a lot of news. It's kind of like there's not enough other data to help support it continuing to surge, if you will. Kind of goes back to that thing we always joke about: the traders need to make a little money. So, boom, the price fluctuates a little bit, and here we go. Okay, let's turn now to our last piece from the one and only Dr. Ellen Wald herself. On the Hill, you are now a regular contributor, it seems like, to the Hill.
I know. I love them. I send them something, and they're like, "We'll be printing this later today." I'm like, cool. That's awesome.
Of course, I must warn the listeners: the views expressed by contributors are their own and not the view of the Hill. So keep that in mind as we go through this piece. That's important.
Yeah.
This is. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, this is your piece that you pinned, so we'll let you break it down. But it's loosening Russia's stranglehold on European natural gas. This is a very geopolitical thing to follow. That, I mean, there's been folks on the U.S. side of things that have almost akin this, rightly or wrongly, at least to a national security threat, is how the U.S. government should view this. But where are we at right now with it, Ellen?
Yeah, so this is actually an issue I didn't know that much about until I started looking into it, and then realized that I had some very strong opinions on it. So what we're talking about is this pipeline that is actually in the process of being built. There is already a Nord Stream pipeline. It goes from Russia through the Baltic Sea to northern Germany. And what they want to do is basically build a second one alongside it that would double capacity. It would really, really increase the capacity of shipping Russian gas to Europe. And a lot of people are very, very opposed to it because it really makes Europe even more dependent on Russian natural gas than it already is. And it already is very dependent on it. And there are a lot of countries that don't like this. Germany seems all in with it, which is kind of freaky. But like Poland, for example, is not okay with this. And there are other countries that are very, very wary of it. But they put a lot of money into this pipeline. And so right now, Congress, or I think the Senate, was supposed to be considering sanctions against the companies that are working on this pipeline. And it's a bipartisan bill. I think Marco Rubio and maybe Jean Shaheen, is she a Democrat? I don't know. Sorry for my kind of brain lapse on who's actually sponsoring this, but it's a bipartisan bill for sanctions against the companies that are involved in it. And so I argue that these sanctions would be a really bad idea because, first of all, the pipeline's already being built. They're not going to stop the pipeline. It's just maybe they didn't do enough sooner to get to the bottom of this, but the sanctions are not going to actually stop the pipeline. And instead, they could really harm American businesses. American businesses that are in Europe could face negative retaliation. What we really need to do is just, like, we have so much natural gas, is really move forward with our own export capacity so that we can actually offer Europe an alternative. It's not, I mean, it's like we're trapping them between a rock and a hard place to say you can't have this natural gas, but like where else are they supposed to get it from? Qatar, Australia? I mean, we can't say to them, we're going to try to stop you from getting natural gas from Russia and not going to offer you a good alternative. So in the piece, I basically argue that, there actually is a role for government in this, and that they could both facilitate movement towards more liquefaction facilities and also to help. One of the problems, and we learned this from Dean Foreman, is that these liquefaction facilities really need long-term contracts in place in order to get the capital to actually move forward. So the government could actually help facilitate this. And we saw Rick Perry helping facilitate a relationship between Poland and natural gas, the LNG producers in the United States. And we just need more of that. And that's really my argument. That's the best way at this point that we can help combat this geopolitical and energy threat.
Right. And if we go back last year, Trump was complaining about NATO and some of that stuff. And one of the things that was interesting, if you go back and think about some of that stuff, was essentially you have these European countries that are looking to be a part of NATO. They want protection, and yet they buy their energy from Russia. And so it's kind of a deal where they're putting themselves to be more leveraged against Russia or with Russia because they buy their energy, but it's probably cheaper for them to buy it directly from Russia as well. So which makes me wonder when we look at some of the stuff, how much of this is kind of silliness because you're so afraid that Russia might attack you or invade you, yet you're buying your primary source to heat and cool your country from the people that you fear the most.
Yeah, exactly. And I can see why they have an issue with this because there aren't any. I don't think they're going to get cheaper alternatives, but there aren't any reasonable alternatives. I mean, I know actually Azerbaijan is working on this stuff, and Azerbaijan would be a good alternative, but it's not quite as much, and it's still expensive. But they need to have diverse sourcing. Also, it's just way too risky to tie all of your energy needs to one country. On top of that, it being Russia.
On top of being Russia, who just sent out all kinds of dirty products, oil. When was it? 2 months ago, 3 months ago? So they, but that's always been interesting to me is that you're fearful of these people, yet you buy stuff from them. The alternative is probably have to pay a little bit more to get it from the U.S. companies, or they have to work out some kind of subsidy on the U.S. side to make it more lucrative to get it across there. But it doesn't. I don't know. That just seems like that would make the Russians angrier.
It also just seems like, to me, it's like, how many things are you going to sanction? Like at a certain point, you issue so many sanctions, you just dilute the power of your economic heft. So I get that maybe it looks good from like a congressional standpoint, lawmakers like, oh yeah, we did something against Russia and we did it together. Let's all hold hands and sing Kumbaya and go into election season this way. But, you got to think about what's actually going on here. And that's why I wrote this piece.
The Hill is your new favorite spot. I'm going to go ahead and call it now.
Yeah, I'm liking the Hill.
So, Ellen, with that being said, I know we have Dr. Foreman on in 2 weeks? I believe I saw this morning coming on. Be back next week, I believe. Regular scheduled time and place. Until then, though, we have 4th of July, so happy 4th of July to everyone out there. Be safe on the lakes or wherever you maybe go. What about you,
Don't set
Ellen?
off fireworks. I'm sorry, but people setting off their own fireworks makes me terrified. So if you're gonna set off fireworks, please, 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 please be careful and don't start a forest fire.
Yeah, only you can prevent forest fires. Where will you be this week, Ellen? Or will you be anywhere?
Yeah, so I'm gonna be on Forbes, and I'm gonna link to that in the show notes.
Okay.
And let's see, I was already on TD Ameritrade Network this morning. Tomorrow, I'm gonna be in a new place, which is actually kind of cool. I've never done this station before. It's China Global TV Network. It's a English language network in China. So I'm going to be on there tomorrow at like 8 p.m. So check that out.
Cool.
Tuesday.
Cool.
That's
that
Tuesday.
sounds fun.
Tuesday night.
Okay, that sounds fun. All right, well, Oil and Gas Contractors Connect, Texas Oil and Gas Podcast, and of course here is where I will be, and we will talk to everyone next week.
Yeah, and shout out to all the journalists and analysts who are stuck in the basement of the OPEC building waiting for a press conference. Hopefully by the time this podcast comes out, you will no longer be there.
All right, bye guys.